Welcome back, everyone. Today's an update on crypto, the stock market, and precious metals. First, we're going to look at Bitcoin. Now, with Bitcoin, we've been in this range right here for about a month, with not seeing a lot of volatility. And as most of you guys know, when we sit in a range for a long time, it leads to invalidations and stop losses starting to cluster. So the biggest clusters and most obvious ones are going to be at the top side here and the bottom side. So this is where, whether or not they have actual stop losses or liquidations in place, which we know a lot of market participants do, but then also the sideline market participants who are wondering, should they sell or buy, depending on if Bitcoin breaks above or below one of these two areas. And of course, we will normally see a decent amount of volatility that comes in as a result of that. But because I've talked about sort of the macro part of this plenty of times in the past, let's zoom into the structure and see what's going on. So there's a couple good things, a couple bad things. I guess it depends if you're bullish or bearish. We've seen pretty good fluidity on the top side of the market. So then if we return to it, there's a good probability that we'll be able to actually break this bearish structure. But it's important to note that anytime the bulls have sort of crossed into bearish territory, the bears have won that battle, and they've won it quite decisively. Not only that, but every time we get a new high, it's not very significant. I've spoke about that in length before, so I won't talk about that this video. But the bad news is, because bears have showed strength continually, it's a higher likelihood that they will show strength again. And as you can see by the structure, every single time that shorts have been taken out in the past and we're not able to achieve anything of significance, instead, we fail back into the range. When we return to those areas in the past where shorts got squeezed, the bears have showed pretty good fluidity. So the probability is Bitcoin will likely go lower, at least a low lower than 80K. But the silver lining is, if that probability doesn't come to fruition and the bulls actually do manage to win, then we should see a pretty big move off the top. We know where all the short sellers are in terms of their invalidations. We know that structure has already been tested, so retesting it, like even seeing like something like this, would actually be really bullish, even though in this example you can see that would be dumping from the top here. But the reason why this is bullish is because it will break these structures here, which have already been tested. So the probability is we're likely going to go lower, but in the event that we don't, we should see a pretty significant rally. And in my last weekly update, I talked about where to look for on the top side if that is the case and we do get a decent move. So I'm not going to talk about it in this video, but just make sure to pay attention to that. And then also on the bottom side, we know where all the longs are sort of sitting. If they had longed it since at any point in December, let's say from here, then they should have been validated on the move down here. Stop losses like this was taken out, like that was taken out. Anything in this range was taken out except for the stop losses at the lows. And so with recent trading in the last week, all of the invalidations that came in here are likely going to be at the lows. Maybe there'll be some in this range, but what we do see is that a lot of longs, at least the December longs, are all clustered in the same spot. So in the event that this breaks, we could see a sharp move, and then the Hail Mary would be sort of like an equal low, which we've seen these last couple of years happen quite frequently, although I wouldn't really assume that to be a good play. Unless you're very aggressive, you could take something like that, but it would be the same scenario, right? All of the invalidations would be stacked at the lows. All of these would be taken out. We'd have more invalidations stacked at the lows. So it's not the best play, but I could see a bounce coming from like somewhere in the 80K range. If not, then we're going to go free falling. And then in the last weekly update video, I talked to you about where to look for on the macro if that does become the case. So overall, when the bulls sort of push into bear territory, the bears have showed up with strength. And this is not necessarily a good sign for the bulls. I guess the good sign would be the fact that if we are able to return to this areas, then we should see a big move. And then lastly in the structure, we can see a lot of short sellers for the last couple weeks are all dogpiled into the same spot, similar to this. So we really got a lot of equal lows, equal highs. A lot of invalidations are sitting in the same spots, which to me seems that we're going to have a big move soon. The question is it going to be higher or lower? I think the best way to go about it is to wait for these invalidations to start being taken out. And then if you see a reversal in either one of these scenarios, then you can look to take one of those. But until we get the big breakout of the range, we're not going to have a clear, definitive answer as to where this thing is going with a high probability. Okay, let's look at Ethereum. So for Ethereum, unfortunately, as you guys know, it's going to follow Bitcoin quite closely. So if Bitcoin dumps significantly, then Ethereum's going to be coming along for that ride. And if you are a little bit skeptical on Ethereum, maybe you hold a lot of Ethereum spot and you're looking to hedge against your holdings, a cheeky spot you could look for right now is if the bulls can get Ethereum back to 3250, 3260, because this is where previous short sellers in the past got taken out, and we didn't see anything significant. Like, why didn't the price go a lot higher here? And unfortunately, it failed. And you could argue maybe that's because of Bitcoin, but the reality of the situation is that's what happened. On the bottom side of the market, we got a lot of long invalidations stacked up, similar to Bitcoin. So a long opportunity, depending on how aggressive you want to be, you could find one near where we're at right now. But if you want to be more passive, it would be around 2,300. So assuming that enough people have sold, the long liquidations come through, we should slide. And where could we bounce from? Where previous long liquidations in the past have been taken out, because that's where liquidity was. So same thing here, right? This would be where to look to short it, because this is where previous shorts got taken out. We didn't see anything significant happen, so it's assumed that the bears will win that battle. And then over here, it's the same thing but inverted, right? We saw the longs get taken out, and we didn't see a deep dive. Instead, price rallied very significantly from there. So they're both the same thing, just inverted, and they're more of the passive plays. There has been a lot of plays in the range, but it depends on how aggressive you want to get. So right now, unfortunately, because of how Bitcoin looks, Ethereum also leans quite bearish. It's going to follow Bitcoin's market sentiment usually very closely. But this can change, and you know, like I said, with Bitcoin and also Ethereum, if we do see a strong rally here, it would be uncanny. It'd be a low probability of that happening. And anytime something that has a low probability happens, it's usually, it could be the start of a nice move to the top side. And then if that's the case, then we want to eyeball around 39 to 4,000 to see how the price behaves here, because that's certainly where we'd run into some turbulence. And then we'll see what happens after. We're just going to take it one step at a time. Okay, so that's a quick update on the bigger cryptos. Let's talk about the stock market. Stock market, I mean, the chart looks lovely. It looks like we're headed for another all-time highs, probably sometime this week. If not, then we could get a little bit of a correction here, down to 68 maybe. But eventually, it's looking like we're going to get another all-time high. And it's not just because of this chart, as most of you guys know that have been following me. I like to look at the volatility index. And like I mentioned in these previous months, the volatility index bottom side structure cracked and sort of broke. And so what that means is it's less likely we're going to get volatility. And if it's less likely we're going to get volatility, then it's more likely that the stock market's going to continue making all-time highs. In the event that we do get some volatility, and it does kick up a bit, I don't see it having any major significance. Any major kicks up of volatility would be extremely concerning, and it's a low probability of happening. But if it does happen, then yeah, it could be something serious. So a little bit of volatility is fine. If we see a lot of volatility, that's definitely a big concern, and it's mainly about the context here, right? We zoom out and we look at the volatility index on a bigger scale, looking at the last couple decades. It's pretty rare that you get two price jumps above the 50 mark, so I'll mark out around the 50 mark here. It's pretty rare that you get that in such quick succession. As you can see in the past, you know, this is probably the closest example, which came after the recession in 2008, but it doesn't happen very often. And because that did happen, it does concern me a bit. So as long as, you know, we don't get another kick up above 50, then we're smooth sailing to all-time highs for the S&P 500. The longer we can spend not going above 50 is a good sign. So it does look good in terms of everything is pointing towards the stock market to continue to make all-time highs. But in the event that it doesn't and we do kick up above 50 again, I think it could be really detrimental. So fingers crossed, but the stock market S&P 500 chart looks great right now. You've got all the short sellers in the same spot. If they had shorted the S&P from anywhere in the history of the S&P, it's likely that their invalidations are all in the same spot. which means when they close those invalidations at the same time, they will all be operating as market buys, which should be able to add a lot of fuel to the fire in terms of that new all-time high. Gold and silver, there's not much I can say here. They're doing great. Gold's starting to slow down a bit, at least relative to silver, but I mean, they're both looking fantastic. There is a little bit of concern of, when precious metals do start to pump a lot, people get a little bit worried about the futures of equities or the futures of the stock market, but I don't see any red flags just yet. So gold, the play is still upward. If you guys have been following for the past couple months, in fact, at the beginning of the year, I've been very bullish on gold and very happy to how it's played out. And the same thing with silver too, right? I plotted out the Fibonacci retracement. You guys know I don't normally like to use these tools or indicators or anything like that, but silver's in price discovery, right? It's at all-time highs, so I really don't have an option or a choice other than to yield to this tool because there's no data on the price chart that I can use to determine where it's going to go next. So the big target is the 46,618 because the rest of it has already been tagged, which is around $88. Now there's an even bigger target at 146, but one step at a time. So until I see some significant price action develop, then it's up only pretty much. And if that doesn't happen, then we're looking at around $88. So unless stuff starts to develop here in this void, in this range, unless the market proves it to me, then I have no choice but to think that we're going to continue to go higher, and where we could run into some turbulence is around 88. Okay guys, that was a weekly update. Make sure you check out the Discord and the live stream, and I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.